Hi, I'm Danny,
Hi, I'm Mel.
and we're the Sheehan sisters. If you haven't seen our faces before, we like to do commentary and podcast style videos on different topics we like to talk about.
Yes, so as always, grab your coffee, your tea, your juice, your water, your beverage of choice. Grab some snacks because we have a lot to talk about today. So, Danny, do you want to tell them what we'll be talking about?
Today, we are going to be reviewing our book of the month for the month of April. I know this review is coming a little bit later than our previous reviews. We wanted to give ourselves the full month of April to read it. And I do think this episode can also be great for anyone who you'll see the title. It is about losing a parent. We're going to be talking about the grieving process. So I think we will be touching upon a lot of topics that many people can relate to. I do encourage you to go read the book if you haven't. Go support Michelle Zauner, the author.
Yes. For those of you that don't know, it's not something Danny and I have spoken about a lot, but we lost our father to cancer 6 years ago in March of 2020. And this book really hit me hard in all the feelings. I was struggling to get through it because I would stop to reflect on a lot of things, and I was also crying through a lot of it. And overall, it is a really sad book and sad story. But I do think if you're someone who has experienced a loved one going through cancer, it hits a little more close to home because you can, which we'll get into as we go over the review. Like, she goes into a lot of specific details of her mother's illness, and a lot of those moments were hard because I felt like I was reliving moments of my own life.
I told Mel that I had these moments where I feel okay when I think about my dad's death, our dad's death. um, and then there'll be other times where it rushes over me, and then I feel just as devastated as I did the day he died. I don't think we really had much guidance when we lost our dad. So you you feel like, okay, I'm in this stage of the healing process, and then you'll have your days where it feels like you're in so much agony over the death all over again. I say this smiling, but I also want to preface that I am somebody who makes dark jokes, okay, first of all, about death and my dad's death. And I also use comedy as a form of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Coping, a coping mechanism.
Coping. It's a coping, yes. Comedy is a coping mechanism for me, especially because I I don't know, it's still difficult to be vulnerable, especially online. So I think throughout this video, I will probably be using some comedy and dark humor throughout this video. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry. That is just something I have incorporated in order to keep my emotions intact. Would you agree, or do you feel like I feel like you've been more open to your vulnerable side as you've gotten older?
Well, it's interesting. It's definitely as I've gotten older, but I also think dad's death had a big part in that. And Danny can attest to this, is I was a very emotionless kind of person. Like, you could put on the saddest movie and I would not be crying. And now I cry at everything all the time. You show me a video of a dog or something and I'm crying. And I really think my dad's death opened that floodgate of emotion and just feeling things more intensely. And having, I don't know, a better understanding of the world and just having more, I don't know, sense everything has more sentimental meaning now, I feel. But even as reading this, even as I was reading this book and thinking of doing the review, I was gonna be like to Danny, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to talk about this yet, because I know this is something we have been wanting to talk about because we do want to help people who are also grieving. But grief is such a tricky emotion, and it's different for everyone, and there's not really an answer or cure to be given that's like, and here's how it ends, because I don't think it ever really does.
Right, which is something I'm learning. That's why I'm like, okay, wait, I'm still having these moments where I feel devastated. But before we get into the book further, I mean, we haven't even started, but we gave you a little bit of our background, which is one of the reasons we did gravitate to reading this book. But we also wanted to bring some snacks into today's episode to A, be a comfort, and B, shop at H-Mart, because the book is called Crying in H-Mart, and we couldn't be reading this book when she mentioned all these delicious foods and delicious snacks that we had to, grab some ourselves. So we will be snacking throughout today's episode. Do you want to share with them what you got from H-Mart?
Yeah, so this was my first time going inside of H-Mart. I was very overwhelmed. I wanted everything. I stuck to just getting a few snacks for now, but I do want to go back to get more foods because I do love to cook, and I want to go and make all of the things, or at least attempt to make some of the things she's mentioned. But I did just stick to snacks for now. The first thing I'm going to do is pour my coffee because I have not had any coffee today, and you guys know how important coffee is to us. So it does say on the back that this is a product of Taiwan. So I just want to let you guys know where some of the stuff is from.
From what we looked up, most of the items we did get are Korean snacks.
Yes, most of what we did get is Korean snacks. This one is not. So I don't want you guys to think I'm like blanketly, me already overthinking as Danny and I do. I'm not trying to just like blanket statement, here are Korean snacks, and then I show you something that's not that. So I got a Mr. Brown iced coffee, and it's gonna be great because it's coffee, so I'm excited. Oh, it's a little lighter than I thought it was gonna be. Is there already... All right, it doesn't say, because some of them said that, like, they had milk in it or vanilla or something. I'm just like, I don't want there to be milk in it because me and whole milk don't get along with each other. Wow, that's good. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna add creamer, but I don't even think I need to add my creamer. Like, this is perfect. This is amazing. 10 out of 10.
The coffee, oh, okay.
Sorry.
10 out of 10. Wow, that's a big rating.
Sorry, okay, show them the coffee you got. Sorry. Sometimes it's difficult for Danny and I to film this because, again, I don't know if you guys know this either, but we're not in the same room. We're not even in the same state.
If you don't know, then we did a great job at making it seem like we were right next to each other.
Exactly.
This is the coffee I chose. You know how we like to do our infomercial moments?
Any of these brands want to sponsor two white girls, let us know.
So listen, I already poured this into my cup. I did try it before I added my creamer because I have to be fair to judging it. Not the strongest, I would say. I tend to like strong coffee. When I mean that, this one tasted a little watered down to me. But that's just because I'm someone who likes really strong coffee.
Mine does taste like a brand I won't mention that I used to drink. It tastes like their little cup drinks, you know, like they're ready to go. That's what this tastes like. So it says I like them. So I did like that brand. I'm not, again, not saying the name of that brand, but if you know what I'm saying, then you know what I'm saying.
To be fair, once I added my creamer, this is perfect. Like, I'm not mad at it at all. Would I get this again? Probably not. Unless they send it to me.
I'll get mine again either, because I thought it was just gonna be black coffee because all the other ones said if it had milk, and then I look on the back of the ingredients and there is milk in this, and my stomach will be upset with me later, but that's fine because the next thing I'm gonna try also has dairy in it, so.
I didn't know you were fully dairy free.
I'm not, but like if I drink too much like milk or ice cream, like I can have cheese every now and then, but not all cheeses have dairy in it. Dairy is from the cow. So
Thank you for the lesson.
me and my stomach are not friends. So I'm probably lactose intolerant, but
My theory is that we all are. I think
we're all
lactose intolerant.
The whole rant that I've been wanting to go on, maybe not in this video, but like I just think it's weird when people are confused by nut milk, but cow milk is fine. That's a whole nother conversation. Maybe we'll do a video on that.
But you know what? We're moving on.
So the next snack I'm gonna try is this cream donut, matcha flavored. I already know it's gonna be good. Like, there's no way.
So I actually got one last night. Me and Theo went shopping at H-Mart last night. I don't know if this is gonna get picked up because Mel is crinkling all over. So Theo and I went to H-Mart together, and he actually wanted, I did see you got the donut because Mel sent me a photo of what she got. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll get it. But I had already grabbed a bunch of things, so I was like, if I don't get the donut, it's fine. But Theo wanted it, so I was like, all right, I'll try it with him since Mel got one. We got the milk cream one, and we tried it last night. Me and Theo tried two things last night. We split them both.
Not want to wait for me, but whatever.
I sent you an audio message saying I was gonna try some things, but I saved what we were gonna use for filming. So the donut was delicious. I need to go back. I want to try the Earl Grey one, and I want to get another milk cream. Those were, oh my God, it was so good. It was like the perfect texture. The cream had a great consistency. It was 10 out of 10.
I'm so excited, and I love donuts. Like, my little treat to myself, I'll go to like the bakery section in the supermarket and get a donut every now and then. Also, I know this is gonna be good because there's this, I don't know exactly what region, but there's a little Asian bakery that me and my friend go to and get little desserts from all the time, and they're always good. So I'm ready. I'm gonna break this open. Look at that. You guys are getting, sorry.
I'm curious what you'll think, but hot take, is there anybody who doesn't like donuts? Have you met anyone?
The health freaks, those people that are like, I can't eat that. You know, like the really healthy people?
We don't know her.
I don't associate myself with those kind of people because I don't need negative energy in my life. Because, okay, listen, we're doing a little mukbang because that's also a Korean thing. But also, our dad loved to eat. And Danny and I also love to eat. And one thing that we like to do with our dad was go and eat. So this is also a very comforting thing for us. And that's something the author talks about in the book too, like how food just like brings her closer to her mom.
Yes, there is a lot about food in this book. I have to be honest, okay? You all are gonna hate me for this, but reading this book made me realize how much of an American palate I have. I don't eat seafood.
Ridiculous.
I'm sorry. I know. Don't come for me. Because I was like, oh, I would love to go visit Seoul. And thinking of the cuisine there, I'm like, I don't know if. Listen, I love Korean fried chicken. Like, give me some soy garlic Korean fried chicken. But I can't do a lot of the meals that were mentioned in this book.
I have to thank going to culinary school for opening up my palate. But even before that, I would be a little more adventurous. Like when I was growing up as a child, I was picky as fuck. I was like chicken tenders, fries, that's it. And then the older I got, the more I would like try new foods. And then going to school, I had to taste everything, and we made food from like so many different cultures. And like being in Seattle, Asian food is a really big influence out here. So I've met a lot of people from different backgrounds, from the Philippines, from Vietnam, and they've cooked food for me, and I'm not going to say no to food ever. So I've gotten to try a lot of different cuisines. And I also work in a seafood restaurant, so I love seafood, and I got to try to get Danny. Next time Danny comes out here, next time we see each other, I'm going to try to get her to try a lot of things.
Well, I did try your scallops when you had your dinner. I also tried, I think, was it the clams?
What?
Was it the clams that we had at the restaurant?
They brought us out clams and octopus, and I tried to get you to try both of those things. I don't remember if you tried the octopus.
No. No. Listen, I feel like my palette has expanded in other ways, but as far as seafood goes, I will give it a try. I think they say your taste buds, was that scientifically proven, or is it a myth that your taste buds change every 7 years?
Your taste buds do change, and so do your allergies also can change develop every 7 years.
So I'm willing, but I'm very sensitive to texture when it comes to my food, which is why you all are gonna hate me too. I don't like my meat bloody. I can't do it.
It's fine.
I know listen, Michelle mentioned it because she was a waitress at one point about the people who order their steak well done. I know it's a sin.
We're all judging you in the back, okay? We're all judging you in the kitchen.
It's fine. It's coming out of my wallet, so make it how I want it. Thank you. Appreciate you all.
I will tell Danny stories of because you have worked in customer service, but I think everyone needs to work in a restaurant because it's a different understanding. And it's interesting because as I was reading her book, and I've read a lot of chef memoirs and autobiographies, I was like, this sounds like the making of a chef while I was reading this book. And it's interesting that she did eventually go and work in a kitchen for a small period of time. But I encourage all people to go work in that part of the service industry. Because I will tell Danny stories, and then she's like, but what about this and that? And I'm like, it's just...
Listen, as long as you
order what's on the menu and how the chef wants to cook it, and that's it. And go home and learn to cook for yourself.
Right, which is why I would never go to a seafood restaurant and order. I wouldn't go to a seafood restaurant, period, because I don't belong there.
No.
But also, we all want to know, are y'all keeping your hands clean back there? Making sure?
I am. Can I say that everyone is? All I can say is learn to cook for yourselves. It's a really important skill to have. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
And I do love cooking at home. Me and Theo love cooking. But again, we love comfort meals, so there's not gonna be, I know seafood could be a comfort meal, just not for me specifically. So let's move on. What else? Let's move on to the snacks we are eating today.
Future video though, I will get Danny to eat some things.
We do want to eventually do some like traveling episodes where we go on a trip and then we'll still have our commentary on the trip. So that could be a possibility. Listen, I'll be open to it. I've tried seafood before. I've tried it. You know, I've also tried peanut butter and I learned I was allergic to peanut butter. So people who would tell me like, are you sure you're allergic to peanuts? Yes.
Well, that's different, okay? If you're actually allergic to something, you're allergic to something, okay? But there are people who are allergic to seafood who are like, I'm still gonna eat it. Like, that's how, like, some people are crazy. But anyway.
Listen, I thought this was a no judgment zone and I'm feeling judged.
No, I'm not judging you. I'm saying I want to help you. It's the internal chef in me that wants you to expand your palate.
Sure. I'll try it, but if I don't like it, then at least I can say I tried it.
Exactly. That's what and there are so many times it makes me so happy when I make something for someone and they go, "Oh, I didn't think I'd like this," or like I thought I didn't like this thing, and then I make them something with it in it and they're like, "Oh shit."
No, of course, and it's always going to be the way someone prepares it. I mean,
Yeah.
Of course, the seasoning, the love poured into it, it's gonna make a difference. But will the texture still be the same? That's the thing.
The texture, I can't help with that because that is why people don't like a lot of different things, is because they say the texture, and like I can't help with that. But maybe if it tastes good enough, you'll forget about the texture. I don't know. Comment down below. But we're getting far off into other, as we do, into other things.
The thing is though, we do love food. We just don't incorporate it enough into our channel, I would say.
No.
Because I have a bunch of food videos, you know, there's a part of me that's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do my own little like food videos on my channel, and then I never post it. So if it happens in the future, just know that it's been years in the making.
Danny has a lot of videos that are years in the making that I've been waiting for her to upload. You can go to my Instagram. If I do have some food videos on there, but not a lot, and I need to get better at posting them, but yeah.
Yes. Me, Mel, and our dad, we love good food, okay? We love to splurge on a delicious meal. This is the chips I'm going to be eating. These are turtle chips, sweet corn flavor.
I also got turtle chips. I hear these are a very popular snack, but I got the churro flavor.
I thought you wanted to open up a different one. Oh, you didn't tell us how your donut was.
Oh, it was good. I'm gonna try everything. So I do like matcha flavored stuff. The matcha is a little strong in this one, but I do like it, and I would love to try other flavors of this. Can I not try the same snack as you? What's?
Oh no, I just forgot that. I remember you holding something up, and then I forgot that you did eat your donut already.
I'm gonna have a buffet of stuff out here.
I'm having trouble opening this.
Same. What's happening? They really sealed this one. Oh, there we go. I hate opening them like that, though. I want to, like, whatever.
Two different types of people.
I'm about to get a scissor because I have one right here. That really upset me.
All right. Listen. I will give you one. Nala's going to be bothering me because there's food.
She's like, and I'll try that too. All right, how are your chips?
So I know it says sweet corn. I wish they weren't as sweet as they are. They're good though.
Mine are good. I'm happy I went with churro flavor. They're not as crunchy as I thought they were gonna be.
Mine are really crunchy. I'm gonna try the churro ones next time.
I definitely would try more flavors of these.
I did get a little lemon tea. I got a little lemon tea, and I just love juice boxes. Do you?
I did see the juice boxes there. They also had a lot of, they also, the one I went to, I don't know if they had this for you, there was also some American stuff because they also had Capri Suns. Also, none of this is gonna go to waste because I probably might bring some of it to work to give to my coworkers because I'm not gonna eat all this. Living alone. I mean, I don't live alone. I live with 20 other people and 2 dogs and a security guard.
Yes, yes. We got the ice cream, which we're gonna have later. We got the sweet corn ice cream.
I also got this aloe vera pineapple juice, which I'm pretty sure I've had like an aloe vera juice before. So I don't have that on my tasting. I also got kimchi. And then I got a lot of stuff. I also got these, they're called Marine Boy. They look like little goldfish crackers and they're seaweed flavored.
I got these kimchi noodles that I'm going to be making probably because we don't film all the way through. We'll stop it and then restart. So at some point I'm going to make these. So I'm excited. I've never tried kimchi before. Again, don't come for me. I'm assuming I'll like it.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna see how you feel.
I do like sauerkraut.
Okay. Yeah, it's fermented cabbage, so it's I'm not gonna say it's similar, but it's in the same family. Overall, I really like the turtle chips. I really like these little Marine Boy these little snacks. It's really good. And that's that.
Love it.
So that concludes our mukbang portion of the video. Sorry to those who don't like when people are eating. I might still be snacking through the video. There is one more snack that I want to try later.
That's what I was gonna say. I'm pretty sure I'll be snacking throughout this episode, but I'll try to do it while Mel's talking.
Right. I'm not gonna be chewing and talking at the same time. I don't like that. I don't mind people eating. I watch people eat, but I don't like, let's not talk with your mouth full. That's just rude.
You mean you don't like people are like this when you're talking?
Right. And then they're also just like sprinkling right into the microphone.
All right, let me pull up my notes. Do you have some notes?
Of course, I got notes in my notebook. I got Post-its on pages, okay? Prepared.
I had 2 questions for you that I wanted to start with. Let me know what you think. I wanted to get your overall feelings of the book, and I also wanted us to talk a little bit about our experience as well as Michelle's with, maybe we can save this a little bit later, but I wanted to talk about the experience of being introduced to death. I feel like in the Western world, a lot of us are either fearful to talk about death or we don't know what to say when it comes to death. And I do think we need to have more conversations about death to normalize it, because when we perceive it as something scary, I think that makes it harder for all of us to accept it. And I know no matter how much you can talk about something, that doesn't mean it's going to take away those fearful feelings or those dreadful feelings, because so many of us are unsure what happens to you when you die, and some people haven't even seen a loved one die or been to a funeral and seen a dead body, so their perception is going to be a lot different from those who have. And I know there's a part in the book where Michelle writes, I'm just diving right in, is this okay?
Yeah, I'm like, do you want me to answer the questions, or are you gonna keep? I'm just messing with you, but I'll let you continue.
I'm just wrapping it up, and then I'll let you take over.
Yeah, no worries. And like, we don't have to go in order. We could just talk about whatever parts of the book. You know what I'm saying?
This is on page 160 if you're following along. Michelle says, it felt like the world had divided into two different types of people. Those who had felt pain and those who had yet to. So going back to my questions, what were your overall feelings, and what was your, how do I want to phrase this, because like I said, it is difficult to talk about death, but what would you say your feelings were around losing a parent?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the book was really hard for me to get through because I felt like I was reliving a lot of moments. And our dad's death is definitely something I'm still coping with, dealing with, healing from. It was, as you know, hard. It was a hard, like, I don't even have the right words to express it. It was devastating. I'm at a loss for words till this day. Like, it's it's hard. That's all I got. Is it's hard and it's devastating.
And many people don't know this, but we were with Dad when he passed.
And that's the thing, again, like, as I was reading this and she's telling her own story of it, I was thinking back to that day. And usually when the anniversary comes up, I think back to that day, and his birthday is coming up, and I'll again think back to that day, and it can replay in my head so vividly. And I really relate it to that part of the book. So at the end of the book, when her mom does pass, her and her dad lie in the bed with her, and that was really sentimental. And that's what me, Danny, and our mom did in the hospital bed, where we were just lying there with him. And it's a weird thing to even talk about or say out loud. Like, I'm laying here with a dead body, and she has that moment too in that scene where her husband comes and lies with them as well. And it sounds weird to, again, people who have not experienced grief or don't understand it. But in the moment, you're like, well, what else am I gonna do? Like, I guess I'll pass the question back to you also. Like, how did you feel losing a parent? I know that we both have had these conversations, obviously off camera, but
We never spoke about it again.
we never spoke. And for some of our family, that is correct.
Mel and I deep dive outside of the channel, so we're constantly we're constantly reminiscing and dissecting family dynamics. I'm sure many people can relate to that. And you know, I have to ask Mel, like, do you have this memory? Because I just want to make sure that this was something that actually happened. And this is outside of our dad dying. There's more trauma, if you didn't know.
I don't know. We don't talk about that. Those will not be in the future videos.
Definitely not. So I think for us, we were introduced to death pretty early on. I I related to Michelle when she brought up a memory of her mother losing her mother. And I remember vividly when dad lost his dad. And that was the first time, and really out of a handful of times that I've seen dad die. Dad die. Oh my God, no. I've seen him die multiple times, yes.
In our dreams, which is another thing we'll get into. See, we're gonna make a lot of jokes because that's all we that's all we have left, okay?
When dad lost his dad, I've never seen him cry like that. I'm not sure if you even remember this, but he was sitting on the couch sobbing. And we were so young. I think I was around 8 or 9 years old. I can't remember for sure. Maybe even younger. No, it had to be like 8 or 9.
That sounds about right, yeah. And so I do have that memory, but in my memory he's sitting on the stairs, but I think it would make more sense that he was sitting on the couch. But I do want to say, like Danny just said, like unfortunately we've experienced a lot of death in our family. And before our dad passed, we had already lost our grandparents and other family members. And even after our dad passed, unfortunately, like it's just something we
Were exposed to pretty early on.
yeah. So yeah, I would say you were like 8 or 9.
Right. So I feel like we've been to a lot of funerals, unfortunately, and our dad, he wasn't a religious man, and I know Michelle mentioned that about her mother, and that's something I even noted because she liked that her mom didn't confine to a religion.
I related to that part too. Sorry to cut you off. And I wanted to talk about that as well. And again, we're going to be jumping around a lot in this video. So if you read the book, it'll help you keep up. But even if you haven't and you've lost a loved one, I think you could also relate. But yeah, we are going to just be like kind of as we usually do.
Right. So we did have a church service for dad, but that was mainly because of our mother. But dad never mentioned if he wanted a church service. We just did it because that was what mom wanted. And our dad was cremated as well. We ended up dividing his ashes amongst the 7 of us, because you all don't know, but Mel and I are 2 of 6. So our 4 older siblings have his ashes as well, and then our mother has his ashes.
Yeah. So we all have his ashes, which I'm gonna make a joke because that's what we do. But someone, I don't know how this got brought up, but there was someone at work who was like, I don't think I've ever actually seen an urn before, and like I don't know what brought out that conversation, and I was like, well, I have my dad's in one. And then they just had to walk away laughing because they were just like not expecting it. And that's the thing though, is like, if you're around me enough, I will make dad jokes, and he would have wanted that.
Exactly. And that's something that happened to us after he passed. It went from me like screaming in agony to 10 minutes later laughing. You and I were brought to another room by a nurse.
Should we tell the whole story or is that too much?
I don't know. It is difficult. Unfortunately, our dad was on a ventilator by the time we got to the hospital, so we didn't even get one last conversation with him.
Yeah, I do remember my last conversation with him the day before, but yeah, the day of we didn't get to. And that's something I also related to with Michelle, where like her mom went silent and stopped talking and was just kind of lying there. So I'll let you finish your story. Sorry, we're interrupting each other a lot in this one.
Let me get my version out.
No, it's not my version. It's just like another part of the day.
I'm just making a joke. So I do make dad jokes too, and I know it makes some people uncomfortable, but I think it's hilarious. Unless you also have the same humor and your dad passed away, like those are the people that'll get it. But the people who have their parents, they're just like, oh my God, this is traumatic. Oh, Lord. So, I actually don't remember the last conversation I had with Dad, which is unfortunate. Like, I don't remember the last words he said to me.
Danny doesn't have the best memory, which makes me sad sometimes for her.
So, after he passed, a nurse, I believe it was a nurse, took us into some type of at a conference room to give us some privacy. And she was so sweet, right? Was it the nurse or did they bring someone in to? I know later on someone came in to talk to us.
So you and I left the room and I was breaking down and we were both crying obviously, but like I remember being like on the floor cuz I like sunk down like movie moment in the middle of the hospital. And then you and I are both just crying to each other and this nurse comes over and it's like, "What's wrong?" Like what, being so sweet and caring. It wasn't I don't think she was the nurse specifically for our dad, but she was one of the nurses. And then you're telling her our dad just died, and she's like, "Here, let me bring you guys somewhere to like sit." And she brought us into this like small room. The reason we had left the hospital room is because like our whole like so much of our family was there, so like we just like left to like get away for a second, and then she brought us into this separate room.
Right. And then they sent like the counselor or somebody. I know they have someone on call that helps the grieving families. I forget what their name. I forget their name right now. I think they're literally called a grievance counselor.
Yeah, I think it's just a grief counselor.
I don't I think she came in and then she was giving us some words of wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and then we felt like laughing. Like we were both like we feel like laughing right now. And I believe she encouraged us to laugh, right? So we just started cracking up laughing and we were like, this is Dad right now. Because that was our bond with him. Our dad also did stand-up comedy, for anyone that didn't know. And right before he got diagnosed, he started going back into stand-up comedy and was doing bits at local bars. So it's unfortunate because it was a period in his life where I feel like he was finding his passion for comedy again, and then he got diagnosed. So we just had this burst of laughter, which may sound bizarre, but we felt like it was our dad coming through. And I do remember a conversation I had with him. It wasn't the last conversation I had with him before he died, but it was one of towards the last couple weeks before he passed. He was in the hospital and I was telling him he's going to be able to use this illness and this experience as material. He's like, "You think so?" I'm like, "Yeah." Because I just wanted so bad to believe that he was going to recover. I mean, he did go into recovery and then the cancer came back. So I just really wanted to, as much as something inside of me was like, I think he's going to die, I also was in disbelief. I was trying to convince myself that he wasn't going to die. And that's why I wanted to talk about future things with him. But I feel like there was a part of him that felt it too, but he was never going to admit that to either of us.
Right. I think he didn't let on to how sick he actually was, and that was to protect us. And there's a part of the book on page 170 that I really related to, that goes to with what you're saying, how we obviously when a loved one's sick, you want to believe, you want to stay positive for yourself, for them, you want to believe that they're going to get better. And I'm going to read a few sentences here. It's really the first page of chapter 15.
Okay.
So she says she's talking about, like, after her mom passed, seeing all the furniture and they're reminding her of her mother. And she says, they reminded us of the stories that had flooded in while she was alive, of cancer patients who had survived against all odds. I'm sorry, I'm going to try. I'm laughing. And just to keep from crying, I laughed.
Exactly.
But anyway, they reminded us of the stories that had flooded in while she was alive, of cancer patients who had survived against all odds. Okay, not gonna apologize for my tears. How someone's neighbor had conquered her own death sentence by way of meditation and positive thinking. How so and so's cancer had spread to multiple lymph nodes, but through envisioning a new blemished bladder, a miracle occurred and he was now in remission. Anything seemed possible if you just had an optimistic attitude. Maybe we hadn't tried enough, hadn't believed enough, hadn't forced fed her enough blue-green algae. Maybe God hated us. There were other families who had fought and won. We had fought and lost, and among all the natural heartbreaking emotions we had experienced to feel, it also felt slightly embarrassing. And I really related to that part of the book as well, where, like you're saying, you want to believe that they're going to get better and everything's going to be okay and start planning for future events. And that's something the author did in this book too, where they're like trying to plan trips and plan all these things and stay optimistic, and then it doesn't happen. And it's I'm not going to say like I felt embarrassment per se, but like I definitely felt some kind of like failure, like I hadn't done enough and like we hadn't done enough. And I'm curious to know if anyone else out there who's dealt with this, if they've had similar emotions. It's again, it's a hard I'm gonna keep saying that, but it's a hard thing to navigate. And I remember being angry at him too. And there's even another part of the book that I marked where she's trying to feed her mother and her mom doesn't want anything and she's getting frustrated with her. And I remember feeling that exact way as well, where we're trying to give him the supplements that he needs and you don't know exactly what they're feeling and what they're going through, and all you want to do is like try anything you can to make them feel better and get them some kind of help. And then it's difficult because they're going through a pain that's unimaginable that we don't even know or aware of. And I remember being angry at my dad because I'm like, oh, you're not fighting hard enough. And like, how selfish of me to even think that.
Of course. And with our father, he very much was the type of man that didn't like to show any type of weakness. So I think throughout his experience, he was trying to shelter us from how much pain he was in, and perhaps he had thoughts he didn't feel comfortable expressing, because how are you going to tell your children that you're going to die, right? Like, if that came across his mind, I don't think he would have shared it with us, because he wanted to still be that strong dad, right? And we didn't really want to accept that he was going to pass. So even when he would have conversations with me where he was like, okay, I'm worried about your, like, I am worried about your mother if anything happens to me. And, you know, the most he would say were his concerns if he did pass away. And I would just brush it away and say, well, that's not going to happen. Like, nothing's going to happen to you. So I do think he realized how much we did want to be optimistic, and I don't think he wanted to let on how, you know, how much he was struggling.
Of course not. And I would say my advice to anyone who is dealing with a loved one who's battling cancer is spend as much time near them as possible. Ask if they're feeling up to it, because I know a lot of the time they're sick and they don't feel well and they need a rest, and then that also sucks because then you don't get to spend the time with them that you want. And I watched an interview with Michelle Zauner. She's like, she felt like a lot of all the memories she had with her mom was when she was sick, even though that wasn't most of her life, but unfortunately that was like the bulk of the end of her life. And I wish I would have spent more time trying to have conversations and ask questions, because I do remember like the day before he was able to talk and it was just me and him in the hospital room, and he had asked me something similar, and he's like, well, what, he wanted to know like if I was going to be okay if he didn't get better. And I kind of brushed it off and I said, I don't want to think about that. And he just grabbed my hand, and our dad wasn't very affectionate. Our family in general was not very affectionate. And he just grabbed my hand and we both just sat there. And I wish I would have taken that opportunity. Like if I would have known that was the last conversation, then I would have said more and I would have asked more. But again, that's the thing, is I feel like you kind of live in denial while someone's sick, in the sense that you're in denial that it could be the end, you know? So you don't try to have those conversations, even if your loved ones are alive and well, have those conversations. Like, just, that's what I'm saying. It really put a lot of things into perspective for me, as far as like all of my relationships and putting more effort into relationships. And if I'm not getting that effort back, then then I don't want to continue on with that relationship. But like putting more into like truly getting to know people.
Right. And unfortunately, people can go one of two ways after so much loss. It's either I am going to isolate myself to prevent this pain from reoccurring, or I am going to pour more into the relationships around me.
Right. And going off of that as well, there's on page 118.
Is this when she finds out about the tumor?
This is when they find out that it didn't shrink. So even in that moment, her mother saying it's okay. And again, like how the strength that the person who's sick has to have to even comfort the other people. Like you were saying, like that's something like our dad was still doing, where he was still trying to protect us by not revealing too much or not admitting that he felt like it was the end. And she says there, even as she was dying, my mother offered me solace. Her instinct to nurture overwhelming any personal fear she might have felt, but kept expertly hidden. She was the only person in the world who could tell me that things would all work out somehow. The eye of the storm, a calm witness to the wreckage spinning out into its end. I like that quote because I'd written a few poems after my dad had died about him, and I wrote that he was a calm in a storm. And that's kind of something Danny and I are trying to get across, where like when there was a death in the family or something bad was happening, like he could walk in and like tell a joke and like knew how to lighten the mood, knew how to just come in and make everyone feel better. And like would just come in and there'd be like an instant calmness, or like if there was chaos happening or everyone's arguing, everyone's fighting, like he knew how to just come in and just like settle it all down. And yeah, so he was still doing that even while he was sick and even after, because there was the moment that Danny said how we just wanted to laugh because, we felt like his presence coming over us. But there was also the moment, they do give you time with the body. And again, to people who have not experienced that sounds a little weird, but it was me, my mom, my siblings sitting in the room, and we're all just making jokes to one another. Like, that's all we could think to do, because it's what he would have done. He would have came in and been like, okay, I need to lighten the mood, and I need to make sure everyone isn't as sad, and like try to get a little laugh. And like, he just did it so well. Like, he just knew how to do it without it being like distasteful or disrespectful. And like, and that's something we were all trying to do for each other in that moment, where it was like, okay, what kind of joke can I make now?
Right. And I think Michelle was finding her way of coping through cooking, because she had such a closeness with her mother, and a lot of her mother's love would come through cooking and their time out at restaurants and getting lunch together. So I think you do revert back to something that parent would do for you. And she even started learning to cook a lot of the recipes her mother would make. And we see her finding a woman on YouTube who reminded her of her mother. And she started mimicking the recipes so that she can recreate the meals that she grew up with. And there's even a moment later on where she makes this porridge that her mother was eating throughout her sickness. And I'm going to pull up that page in just a moment. This was on page 190. So it's at the bottom of page 190. This was all I wanted, I realized, after so many days of decadent fillets and pricey crustaceans, potatoes slathered in the many glorious permutations that ratios of butter, cheese, and cream can take. This plain porridge was the first dish to make me feel full. Manchi, I hope I said that right. Manchi supplied the secrets to its composition step by step, like a digital guardian I could always turn to, delivering the knowledge that had been withheld from me. That was my birthright. I closed my eyes and spooned the last of the soup into my mouth, picturing the soft mixture coating my mother's blistered tongue, the warm liquid, the warm liquid traveling slowly into my stomach as I tried to savor the aftertaste. And I wanted to talk more about Michelle's experience when her mother was going through treatment. Her mother's friend Kai came to stay with them to be an additional caretaker for her. And we see there were moments where Michelle was feeling a little left out. She felt like Kai was taking over the care, and this was something Michelle had to process, because as much as she felt so grateful for Kai, she also felt like she wanted to be the one to take care of her mother. And that's something I know you and I can relate to. When our father was going to doctor visits and he was also undergoing chemo, we were kind of left out of those visits. And I think that's another reason why we regret not being there for him as much as we should have during those times.
But I also think it was partially him not wanting us to see him in that way.
This is what happens. People beat themselves up for all the things they wish they would have done. And of course, we were in our 20s as well. Sure, how old was I? 32. No,
Well, I
I'm
was
33.
23 when he got diagnosed, and then 25 when he passed away.
Right. So you're in your early to mid 20s. I'm approaching my later 20s, which, sure, I should have been more conscious of the time I should have spent with him. But I still think we weren't fully equipped to to be those caretakers, right? Like I feel like we weren't fully emotionally stable to like fully be there for him. I could have insisted on going, right, if I really felt adamant about it, but when I look back, I was accepting that he didn't want me part of those visits, which again, that's also a respect thing, right? Your parent.
Right. I think that's another part of it as well, where the difference with the, reading this book where it's her mother and like your father, like it's always going to be a different type of relationship. And I'm sure there's people who can relate to like their dad being less emotional and again, being the man, quote unquote, and being like, I'm fine, everything's fine. I'm gonna beat this. Don't worry about it. And like yeah, like a respect thing to be like, okay, dad said he's good. We're not gonna push it. Because I would go in and check on him every morning. So this is another thing I want to say. Danny and I were living. We had both moved back in with our parents before the diagnosis, and it kind of felt like a kismet thing of like we were meant to be there. And I'm keeping on topic but steering a little away, where during the book in the book Michelle starts to plan her wedding. Her and her boyfriend, I think, had only been together maybe 2 years, and she's like, we need to get married, because she wanted her mom to be there at her wedding. She was like, if she's gonna die, I want her to see me get married. And she kind of started focusing on this, and she said maybe people might have thought it was selfish. And I related to that in the sense that Danny and I were looking for apartments while our dad was sick. And I feel like some people might have been like, well, what are you doing? Why are you focused on this right now? But I felt like it was us trying to show that we could be on our own and have some sense of an accomplishment. I'm sure if I were in a relationship at that time, I might have done something like Michelle did, where it was like, well, we need to have a baby, or we need to get married, because like wanting your parent to see you accomplish something or do something that they're not going to get the chance to see. And I really related to that part of the book, because I felt like there were times where we were going and searching and doing apartment hunting, and I think some people were like, what? Why is this your focus? But we felt like, oh no, we're going to show you that we can live on our own and be on our own. Even though, ironically, my dad was like, as long as I'm alive, you'll have a roof over your head. And again, another little joke of the universe there. But I felt like there was a part of us who kind of hyper fixated on something else as well, to distract ourselves, but also to be like, well, we'll look at this thing that I'm doing, and I'm being an adult. What do you think?
I recognize that I was in escape mode during that time. Okay, sorry, I had to take a minute. Okay, so I do feel like I was trying to find ways to escape during that time, which I know is also a coping mechanism. Some people will pour themselves entirely into it, or some people will just, they'd rather be anywhere else than confront the issue at hand. And I do feel like the wedding was a way for her mother to be around all of their loved ones and have that last goodbye. And there's a moment that Michelle expresses after the wedding that I wanted to read, which is on page 145. The following days were quiet. It had felt almost as if the wedding would either miraculously cure my mother of her disease, or she would just disappear entirely into the air like a balloon. But after the celebration, there we all were again. Same illness, same symptoms, same drugs, same quiet house. My father started planning a trip for us to go wine tasting in Napa. A thinly veiled guise to keep up momentum. If we always had something to look forward to, we could trick this disease. Not now, cancer, there's a wedding. and then a tasting in Napa, then an anniversary, a birthday. Come back when we're not so busy.
And I had written down that I feel like it we begin the stages of grief even before the death, and I feel like this goes with bargaining as one of the stages of grief. Of usually, again, after death, you're like, well, if I had done this differently, then maybe this wouldn't have happened. And you do the same thing right before, where she's like, okay, well, if there's a wedding, then you can't get sick, and if we plan this trip, then you can't get sick. And there are even other parts in the book where she starts to exercise, and she believes, she's like, okay, if I run this many miles, everything's gonna be fine. And this compulsiveness to be like, well, I'm gonna somehow do something, and it's gonna change the whole timeline of my life and make things better. And that's another part I really related to, where again I felt like that was something Danny and I were doing, where we're like, okay, we're gonna get this nice apartment, he's gonna come and he's gonna visit us, and we're gonna do all these things and have all these memories. And that's something I did a lot too while our dad was sick, where I was like, okay, once he's better, then we're gonna make all these memories together that I missed the chance to fully do. Because another thing I relate to, I think she was also 25 when her mom passed. And what you don't realize is, from you're young to you're 18, you're a child, and you're kind of just going through the motions of life and trying to figure things out. And your parents are kind of just your parents. And I also, a part we didn't get into yet is like the angsty teenage years, which I think Danny was definitely more of the rebel than I was, but I definitely had a few moments. Oh, sorry, there was a motorcycle. I've definitely had those moments of me slamming my door, saying I hate you, and you start to regret those things, and you try to tell the younger generations to appreciate their parents and things like that. But I think you spend most of that time just kind of learning what life is, and not taking in like, oh, I need to spend time with my parents. You're more so, and not everyone, but you're more so like embarrassed by them, and you're just like, it'll get away from me, I'm gonna be my own person. And then you get into your 20s and you're like, I'm an adult and I can do whatever. And I think it's really not until you're in your 30s to 40s that you fully do appreciate your parents. And I always felt in my mind like, oh, when I get there, then our relationship is going to be better, which is kind of silly now thinking back at that. And of course, hindsight's always 2020, where it's like, I again should have spent more time then, but I didn't know that. Like, you always think you have more time, and you do this thing where you're like they're doing, where they're like, well, let's plan another trip and she's gonna get better. And I think that's something that we did a lot, and it's definitely a coping mechanism for sure.
Well, it's difficult because not everyone has an ideal relationship with their parents. So, of course, if you do have animosity within you and you have your issues with your parents, a lot of the times your first instinct as you get older is to move away, right? Or create that distance if you can't physically or financially move away, move out of that house or apartment with them. So that was the issue with Michelle, where she needed her space from her mother, and that space allowed them to reconcile their relationship and build a new one, right? Where she didn't feel like her mother was overbearing and they weren't so volatile with one another. And I think that's something you and I can relate to, where we did have our frustrations with our parents. And I know we haven't mentioned our mom too much in this video. We did say we were going to, but that's also a pretty sensitive relationship that still needs healing till this day. We were closer with our father, and we shared a lot of deep conversations with our dad, but unfortunately a lot of those conversations would only be when he was under the influence. So when he was sober, he wouldn't get emotionally deep and wouldn't be as receptive to our emotions and our experiences of our childhood. And I think we were at a place in our life where it was time to move out, and it was time to really prove ourselves to them that we can provide for ourselves. And we still had a lot of hurt and unresolved issues with both of them. But because dad got sick, we tried our best to put that aside. It's difficult, right? It's difficult, right? Because we did try to put it aside, but we were also not fully equipped to manage those feelings.
And that's something I did appreciate while reading this book, that the author didn't stray away from talking about the tough times between her and her mother, because that's something Danny and I speak about a lot too, where someone passes away and then you feel like you can only say good things about them, but you have to accept moments for what they were. And again, that's another part I really appreciated in this book, where she dives into how she felt about her mother early on. And again, like we're gonna keep saying, it's difficult because it's like you don't want to feel like you're being disrespectful, but at the same time it's like, well, this was my experience and this is how I felt. And there were times, she mentions in the book, there are times she wishes her mom wasn't her mom, and she would look at other people's mom and be like, that's the relationship I want. And unfortunately, sometimes it does take something major happening in your life for you to step back and have a better understanding and realization. Yeah, I think we did spend a lot of time having this resentment, and now we're kind of like, well, now I wish I didn't spend that time. And then, yeah, it's like a double-edged sword of like, well, I want to work through these emotions. And I'm sure the author Michelle feels that way too, where she wishes she had more open conversations with her mother that she didn't get to have. Because again, like you were saying, like when our dad got sick, we kind of put that stuff aside. And I feel like that's something the author did as well. Like once her mom got sick, and she had a whole new understanding of her mother.
Well, she has this moment after her mom passes where she felt like their relationship was just getting good, where they did have this mutual understanding of one another. Michelle even remarks on a time where her mother tells her, I never met anyone like you. And she almost had this confused feeling of like, well, you're my mom, like I'm half of you. And I think that's something we navigate as children, right? When we do grow up and we realize our parents are also messed up adults navigating this crazy world. And yeah, we can give them that grace while still processing our own feelings of them as our parent. And we do realize that not every parent likes their child, right? Sure, they'll say they love them because that's their child, but that doesn't mean you like who they are. And I feel like for Michelle, it was put onto her at such a young age that she was a bad child, right? We even see her mom during one of their fights when she was younger say that she got an abortion because Michelle was such a terrible child, which we know that wasn't true, but her mother was saying that out of anger in the moment. And she has this realization that her mom carries her own secrets. But I also feel like she took on those characteristics, right? Even her grandmother and her aunts would, like, her aunt called her famous bad girl, and then right before her grandmother died, she called her a little chicken shit. And I feel like, yeah, like, not, not every child is a saint and an angel, but when you have people around you telling you this is who you are, then you are gonna grow up and start rebelling and feeling angsty and feeling like, well, if you're gonna make me the bad guy, I might as well be one. So I understand both sides. Like, I understand her mother and I understand Michelle, right? Like, I can see where her mother's like, you're ungrateful and you're spoiled and you're not realizing how much I do for you and how much we do for you, like me and your father do for you, and how good you have it. Which we've all heard our parents say, like, they're always gonna be like, you had it better than I did. Things like that, things of that nature. So when I'm reading Michelle's upbringing, I can see both sides, but I can also understand why she needed her space from her mother. And then also understand, like, retrospective of how much her mother really did love her. And unfortunately, sometimes that love can translate into overbearingness and control. I do think we do see parents who have control issues over their children. And it is a fine line between unhealthy and I'm doing what's best for you. I feel like I'm just rambling right now, but I'm trying to, like, come to a conclusion of my point right now.
Can I go off of that to help round it out? So I had written down learning to accept our parents for who they are and not who we want them to be. And I feel like that's something our parents are doing with us as well, where we're looking at our parents and being like, well, I want you to be like this. And our parents are looking at us and be like, well, I want you to be like this. And then this point of contention to be like, well, you're not who I want you to be. And they're like, well, you're not who I want you to be. And coming to that crossroads of learning, it's hard to learn to accept one another. And I feel like it oftentimes doesn't happen until we get older and we step into adulthood. Like, I'm going to be 32 this year, which is the age my mom was when she had me. And I'm the youngest of 6. And I can't even fathom having 6 children. I can't even fathom having one child. I don't even have a pet right now, okay? And she had 6 children. And you know what I'm saying? Like, you start to get older, and Michelle has that moment too where she goes off to college and she has to cook for herself and clean for herself. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, like, I don't want to do these things. And she resented her mom growing up being a homemaker and doing all these things. And I think you take little things for granted, or you're annoyed at them when you're younger because you're like, who cares that the table has books on it? You know, like, little things that, like, your parent is obsessing over. And that's something her mom was doing, was like obsessing over how clean the house needed to be or how she wanted her daughter to be presented. And I think that's something that a lot of women can relate to with their mothers, where their mom is very much wanting their child to be a representation of them when they go out, and they want them to have their hair nice and everything neat and all of these things, and being like, well, this isn't important to me, so, like, why do you care? And then later in the book, when her mom did get sick and she had to go back to see her, she's making sure her clothes are perfect and she looks perfect, and she goes back to see her mom. And I thought I was going to help you round this out, but I don't think I am. But I think it's because we haven't met the conclusion of that yet.
Well, one thing I have realized is that the guilt you carry from your parents, specifically your mother, I'm sure many people can relate to this, especially women, there's this mother's guilt where you feel like, I still owe so much to you, even though we didn't have the best relationship, even though we had our tumultuous moments, and even though we don't understand each other and we may not be able to relate to one another, there's still this unspoken obligation to your mother. And it seems like Michelle felt indebted to her mother once she realized she was going through this illness. She did want to try to make up for all the time she was that rebellious child, trying to make up for lost time where she moved across the country for college because she needed that space from her mother to be her own individual person. And I can understand her feeling like she needed to find her own identity, especially because there was this creative side to her, this artist, she's a musician, this musician within her, and she knew that that was something her mother didn't fully support. So I think there were multiple layers of their disconnect, right? And there's even a moment where Michelle feels like she has to abandon her dream and her passion of being a musician after her mother dies, where she's like, okay, I'm going to move to New York and I'm going to get a corporate job and I'm going to do the 9 to 5 thing and I'm going to be a typical adult and find the salary job and get an apartment and focus on taking care of myself and paying my bills. And she ultimately does live her dream, and she is a successful artist, a successful musician. And it's unfortunate that her mother never got to see that part of her. She even says at the end that she felt like after her mom died, maybe she told God to make her dreams come true for all the pain that she went through. And I can relate to that because our dad was a comedian, and Mel and I have been trying to do YouTube for years now, and sure, it's not a raging success as of right now, but there is parts of us that we wished our dad did see. We didn't get to prove to him that we can be this responsible adult. And even when we do start to see success in YouTube, he'll never be able to witness that. But we do owe a lot of our personality to who he was.
Of course, and I have those moments too. You know, in the book, it comes full circle where she gets to perform in Korea and in one of the cities that her mom and her would always go back to visit. And she was wishing her mom was there, but the songs were about her losing her mom and the irony behind all of it of like, well, would she be there if her mom hadn't passed away? And I think about that all the time too, where a year after our dad passed, I moved across the country and went back to school. And obviously there's so many moments that I wanted him to be there for, but then I'm like, would these moments exist? You know, like the whole butterfly effect of it all, of like, would I have gotten the courage to finally like get up and do things with my life? Like, I really do feel like that was a big motivation for me to do more. And our dad would always say to us, because we had been pursuing YouTube for a long time, and he'd go back and forth between, okay, I want you guys to be realistic, because he had dreams, like we had mentioned. And that's something too, where your parents have dreams and they don't always come to fruition, so they just want you to be ready in case yours don't. And sometimes it comes across really negatively, and sometimes it comes across supportive, and it could go either way depending on who your parent is. And sometimes your parents just don't believe in you at all. But he would always tell us, life's gonna hit you. And it was just interesting because I'm like, me and Danny had already felt like life already hit us, and we're like, well, we're gonna get back up if life hits us. And then our dad died, and it really hit us, and it really took the wind out of us. And Danny and I often say, going back to your earlier question at the beginning of the video of how we felt losing a parent, and Danny and I often say that we both died that day too. Like, I really felt like the life coming out of me, like my soul was above my body. Like, I felt like that for a really long time. And again, it's just like this weird thing of like, would I have accomplished what I've accomplished if he hadn't passed away? Would I be where I am today if he hadn't passed away? And like Danny's saying, and we still have so much more that we're going to accomplish and do. And even just like seeing our videos, like some of our videos are starting to get 600 or 800 views, and like that's a lot for us because some videos we're sitting at 30 views, you know, and like our parents were like, okay, hang it up, it's maybe it's time to give it up. And just even wanting him to see that small of a stride would mean so much to us. And like, yeah, I don't know, it's definitely an interesting thing to think about. I feel like I keep going, feel like I know where I'm going with these sentences, and then I don't know where I'm going all of a sudden.
Of course, and that's why I said earlier, there's two paths I think people take after a loss. You're either going to transform, or you're going to be stuck in your ways and you're going to ignore the grief and ignore the trauma. I know a lot of people have an inability to process those emotions, and they move on with their life as though, you know, it did happen, but I think that that's their coping mechanism, where they'll push it to the back of their mind and it's not going to be this monumental, pivotal moment in their life.
Right. They're just going to keep going through the motions of life and keep it as is. And I was going to say also, I feel like you went down a similar route as Michelle, where you got the stable job and climbed the corporate ladder as well. So I just feel like you and I are getting closer to that pivotal moment of our art taking off.
Of course, and that was something that was unexpected for her. I mean, she did make an album to process her grief. And like you said, it was an album about her mother's death that ultimately gained traction. So you never really know what will be that takeoff moment.
Right. She had like stepped away from it, and years later the song just started to like pick up, and she even became a writer. Obviously she wrote the book, but before that she had gotten a short story published as well. So I relate it a lot to, I was gonna say to this character, she's not a character, she's a real person, but I relate a lot to Michelle. And we didn't talk about, which is a major part of the book, of her feeling distance she had with her mother as being half American and growing up in America, and having that distance from her Korean side, wanting to relate back to those roots after her mom passed, because that's kind of, she was losing that side of her and that part of her. And we didn't dive too much into that aspect, because I apologize to anyone if we talk too much about ourselves on our own channel, but we really did relate to the grieving part of the book.
I mean, I did mention her diving into recipes her mother would make and learning to cook for herself. And I do think she can come out with a follow-up to this to even dive further into her feelings surrounding being half Korean, half American. She does touch upon it throughout the book, but I do think there are moments she can deep dive to fully explain that otherness that she hinted at, where she you know, a lot of people who are mixed do feel like they don't belong in either world. So I'm sure there's more for her to say when it comes to that cultural divide and understanding her own identity. I do love that she maintained that relationship with her aunt who lives in Korea, who lives in Seoul, despite the language barrier, so that she still has that connection to her mother and her Korean side. We didn't really get to speak on her father, on Michelle's father, who she struggled to connect with. And she had her own issues with him. And we see towards the end of the book that they tried to go on a vacation together after her mom passed.
And that was another part that I related to as well, where you were saying earlier, like we were closer to our dad, and she felt like she was closer to her mom, and now she's left with her dad, and she's like, well, how much of a relationship are him and him and I really have now that she's gone, because that was what was keeping us together. And then they have this argument in the restaurant. Is this what you were going to bring up?
Yes.
In that argument, the dad makes a comment to her, and I feel like this is something that happens within grief, and I've heard it happen to other families too, where sometimes an important person in the family passes away and people start to separate because they realize they didn't really have much in common besides the love they had for that one family member. And then also, anger is part of the grieving process, and sometimes we project that anger onto others. And I just related a lot to that moment where the dad makes the comment to her, like, well, she warned me not to let you, I don't know the exact quote.
176.
I'll pass that on over to you.
So they're in the restaurant, and her father says, "Your mother warned me not to let you take advantage of me." And there it was. He had committed the unspeakable. He'd put words into the mouth of a dead woman and used them against me. I could feel the blood rushing to my face. "Oh, well, there's plenty of things Mom said about you, too, believe me. There's a lot of things I could say right now that I'm choosing not to." And I feel like this is such a common fight that you have with family members during the grieving process, because you don't know how to transmute those emotions. And oftentimes, like you said, it comes out as anger, and you start to think back to words that were exchanged. And I know parents do this, where the parents are talking about one another to the child, and that's something Mel and I can relate to as well, where this is where the unresolved issues start to surface.
Right. And then her and her father, again, I don't know what's happened since the book was published, but in the book, she leaves the restaurant, storms off, and then the next day they act as if nothing happened. And that's something Danny and I can relate to as well, where our family was very much sweep it under the rug and then we move on.
From what it seems, they both went their separate ways. I don't know what their relationship is like in present day, but it seems like because her mother passed, she's no longer the glue to keep Michelle and her father together. And that, like you said, that's what tends to happen, where someone in the family that is the glue, if they pass away, then you tend to lose contact with those family members. I mean, we don't have any contact with our dad's side of the family after he passed. He was our glue to his side of the family, and because he's no longer around to be that bridge, there's nothing else keeping us connected.
And as you were mentioning before, some people really distance themselves and isolate themselves. And again, grief is just such a weird emotion to navigate and process. And everyone's going to go through theirs differently. And and I always tell people this when I meet people and they've lost a loved one. And it's interesting. I feel like after my dad died, I kept meeting people who had also lost a parent. Interestingly enough, I feel like before that, I never fully, maybe like one person before that had met that had lost a parent, and now I feel like I meet more people. And again, I believe in like cosmic things, so I believe it's meant for a reason. But I often let them know that family can get weird after death, and it doesn't always bring everyone closer together as you might think as you might think it will.
Well, just to bring it back to my question in the beginning about one's introduction to death and being able to have more conversations about death and the loss of loved ones, I think if we're unable to have these conversations and delve into the unknown and understanding that all of these emotions are going to surface because of a death in the family, and having those conversations around that, I think that does help the grieving process. And it can be frustrating. I know Michelle mentions this in one of the chapters where she said her friends didn't know what to say to her. And that's something I'll still experience to this day. Like we mentioned, bringing up our dad dying or making jokes of it, and it does make a lot of people uncomfortable. But that's why I feel like if we start to have more conversations around this, then more people can feel guided towards that healing process. And even for ourselves, we're all going to meet death one day. And as much as we can push that away or look to a religion, right, to guide us, some of us don't look to a religion for answers. And that was another aspect of Michelle that I related to, because she told us she's an atheist. And there was a part in my life when I was in high school where I thought I might be an atheist. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'm agnostic. And then I had my own spiritual journey, and I do have my own relationship with spirituality and with understanding what may happen to you after you die. Do I know for certain? Absolutely not. But I am open to different possibilities, and I think most of us try to have a grasp on what's going to happen to us after, whether it'll be, some people feel nothing will happen to them, like they will cease to exist, and that'll be that. Some people believe in heaven, and some people believe in hell, and some people feel like they're going to be reincarnated. And that's another part of the book I wanted to mention, where her mom didn't believe in a religion, but she did believe in reincarnation, and she wanted to come back as a tree. And I think we either like ignore the fact of death, or we find ways to comfort us about what will happen to us when we die. But my point is, I think we should talk about it. And I know it's such a touchy subject where it can make many people uncomfortable, but if we face the truth of coming to our expiration date, maybe we can find ways to find peace surrounding it.
To go off of like what you're saying, I just feel like a lot of people don't know how to form an emotional connection. And like we were saying earlier, some people haven't even experienced grief or know how to process it. Even we're having somewhat, especially myself, having difficulty talking about it. But I agree. I think it is something we should talk about more often. And I think a lot of people get awkward or quiet, and they don't know what to say or how to respond. And maybe they're getting in their own head about it. Maybe they start to think about their own loved ones. Maybe they start to think about themselves. I know there are plenty of days where I'm having existential crises thinking about death. I think, again, it goes with something we've been wanting to talk about, of like trying to form a deeper bond with other people and form an emotional connection. And I think as a society, we've kind of disconnected from that. I don't know what's happened. I don't know what the reasoning behind it is, but I wish we were more comfortable having those vulnerable conversations and being open and honest with one another, and being able to open up. And there's the word of like trauma dumping, and I never want to feel like I'm doing that to someone, but our dad was an important part of our lives, and it happens where you're meeting someone new for the first time and you're gonna talk about your life, and they're gonna be like, well, what about your parents? Like, I'm sure you've experienced that before too. And then the conversation has to be had where you go, oh, and my dad passed away. And then it usually kind of like dies the conversation out, because some people, again, like I said, aren't comfortable now diving into that. But I always make sure to bring up my dad when I can, if there's something that reminds me of him, if there's something, a memory that comes to mind. And I don't want to lose those memories or that part of me, because he was so important to us. And I try to also be conscious of myself, where I try to give people the attention and affection that I would want in return. So that's another part of it as well, where it's like, okay, if I want to have these deep conversations, then maybe I should start to introduce them and see what happens. Sorry, I keep feeling like I have it, and then I lose it.
I have met people who have lost someone they loved, and they prefer not to talk about them because it's too traumatizing or too painful, and I can understand that. So it is hard to navigate, oh, does this person want to talk about the person they lost? Or is that too much of a sore point to ask questions about? And of course, it does come, it does tie into having that discernment and picking up on social cues. And like you said, maybe it does fall more on us to be like, well, I'm going to talk about my dad.
Exactly, and that was like one of the points I was attempting to make, to go off of what you were saying of why we don't have those conversations. And again, I think it just is this like societal disconnect that I feel like is getting worse and worse, where people aren't diving deep into one another and are being a bit more selfish, or I don't know, maybe they're afraid they're going to say the wrong thing, or they don't have the right words to give, or I don't have the answers or the reasonings behind it. But I do agree with what you're saying of like wanting to have more open conversations.
I want to be able to reach a point in my life where it is my moment, like this is the time where I'm going to cease to exist in this form, and I am at peace with it. And of course that does tie into wanting to achieve many things before that happens, and you never know when it is your time to go. I do think many people do get a intuitive inkling that their time is coming. I mean, I remember my dad telling me years ago that he doesn't think he'll live past 60, and he died right before his 60th birthday. And I've met people who have had relatives who felt like they were going to die young, and they did. So, that's just my spiritual take on it. And I do think I will live a long life. But it's ironic that I didn't have this perception or this. I didn't feel this way when my dad was sick. Like, there was nothing inside of me that felt like, okay, well, you need to prepare for this. Of course, like you said, hindsight is 2020. I wouldn't have reached.
Sorry.
I wouldn't have reached this level of understanding if my dad didn't pass, right? Like we said earlier, you know, if this didn't happen, then I wouldn't have been the person I am now. So I know we all experience something similar where we do need something catastrophic to awaken certain parts of us, right? And to force us to grow. And like you said, I know you were going to bring this up, that we were in denial. Of course, when you have someone you love so much and you are close to, you don't want to imagine the world without them.
Right. And like you're saying, it definitely gave us a better perspective and outlook on life after he passed. And there are still moments where I feel like I'm not doing enough with my life, and I have to remind myself, like, this is not what your dad would have wanted. And he always encouraged us to live life and do more than he did. And I think that's one of the reasons we've continued this channel as well, because it's something we enjoy doing. And like, just you know, go and be happy and live your life. And it sounds easier said than done, of course, but you don't know, we don't know when it's going to end, and it can end at any time. So it's like, yeah, let's continue to make these videos. And I keep fucking losing my, more than ever, I keep losing my train of thought, and it's very frustrating. I think it's just because, like, all the emotions are stirring around me. But the cliche of live your life is what I'm trying to say. And Danny and I mention cliches all the time, and our dad was someone who really instilled those cliches into us.
I do think we need reminders, like memoirs like Crying in H-Mart, right? I am the type of person that realizes how fleeting life is on a regular basis. And I seen an interview with Michelle Zauner where she mentions that she thinks about all these different scenarios that could happen to her when she's out, where she may end up dying. And I think that does happen to people who are exposed to death, especially us. We were exposed to death at such a young age. So I would have anxiety around death growing up. But now more than ever, after dad died, I think of all the different ways I could die when I step out of the house. And I worry about my partner dying, and I worry about my dog dying, and I worry about my family dying. And I have to find some grounding. I have to ground myself when I start to spiral into those emotions and into those what if scenarios, because as much as I have that understanding we're all going to cease to exist at one point in our life, obsessing over it isn't going to allow me to enjoy my time with these people, enjoy my life.
Exactly. I feel like there are so many moments where I sit there in my head, and then the moment's over, and I'm like, you didn't enjoy the moment. You weren't there. You weren't living in it. And that's something I really still need to work on, and just getting out of my own head and doing more. And I think, like we were saying, like, our dad passing definitely does affect us to be like, okay, we got to live our life, because he would have wanted us to live our life, and he would have wanted us to do so much more. But I wanted to bring up a part of the book, we're going on a little tangent for a second, but I thought that this was interesting. On page 108, she's sitting with her aunt, and her aunt asks her, "You're going on a journey and you have 5 animals." I think this was her. It was someone in her family. I'm not sure. Unmi?
It was her aunt.
Okay. Yeah. So she says, "You're going on a journey and you have 5 animals: a lion, a horse, a cow, a monkey, and a lamb." And I decided to do the exercise with them as they were doing it, and I was curious to see if you had as well, and what animal you had chose to keep by the end of it, or if you Did you do it or no? Did you think about it when you were reading this part?
Even though I knew what each meant, I feel like I was trying to backtrack to say, okay, what would I have chosen if I was given this test? And I feel like I would pick the cow.
Okay. I picked the horse.
Okay.
And I feel like that really fit for me. So they tell you as you're going on this journey to keep getting rid of animals, and the animal you pick at the end is um, symbolize your priorities in life. So it was saying that I'm now on page 110. The cow represents wealth because you can milk it. The horse represents your career because you can ride it through. The lamb is love, and the monkey is your baby. And the lion is your pride, right? So I kept my horse, which is my career, and I definitely am someone who's a workaholic. So I think that fit me pretty well, and I was curious to see what you pick. So you picked your wealth. Where are you getting this wealth from? How do I have a career and no wealth? You know, I don't like that. But the cow was my last. Like, so I did it. I was going through like what I would get rid of. And tell me how. So I got rid of the lion first, which is pride, and then I was thinking the monkey, which is your baby, and I'm like, I'm confused by that. But I was like the horse because in my head I'm on this journey. It's interesting because the narrator Michelle, she was saying how she would be taking all these modes of transportation and she wouldn't be able to take all the animals with her. And in my head, I'm like, well, I'm going to ride the horse and the horse is going to get me where I need to go. And that was kind of my thought process behind it. And then I did think of the cow for milking. So I was like, ultimately, like the horse and the cow were like my last two. And then I'm like, I'm going to keep the horse.
Ironically, we started this video talking about how we shouldn't be drinking cow's milk.
And you kept the cow. But in survival,
Right. That was my mindset.
and you can make a lot of money from the cow. Anyway, yeah, I thought that was interesting, a little game, and I wanted to see your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure about the monkey representing your baby.
I guess because it's like closest to a human. But yeah, the author ends up picking the same as her mom, which I thought was really sweet because I feel like they took care of each other in different ways. And the author never mentioned if she wanted to have kids or anything of that nature. And I thought that was interesting that was never part of the that never was brought up at all. Maybe she briefly mentioned it. Not that she has to, of course, she doesn't have to have children. I just thought it was interesting where she's talking about, usually, you know, thinking about a mother-daughter dynamic, sometimes you think about what you would do with your own children. And it's obviously, it's fine if she doesn't want to have children. We support a women's choice. Another thing I want to mention, I kind of want to like, since we've been going for a long time, I kind of want to like speed run some other things in the book. And I wanted to bring up Peter, who's her husband, which we didn't really talk about him. But in the beginning where she finds out her mom's diagnosis and he comes and he drives to see her, I remember reading that and being like, she better marry this man. Not even knowing what was to come in the book of like her life and everything. But I was like, if I finish this book and find out she's not with Peter anymore, I'm gonna be really sad. And I love that. Like that's a true meaning of love, where he drove, what is it, 3-4 hours to come see her when she found out that her mom was diagnosed.
Yes, and they are still together. He plays guitar in their band.
They love their relationship. They get to have like share their art together, and I just love that there was a love story in this because I love love. But that moment really like stuck with me, and just having someone like that in your life, whether it's a romantic partner or not, but having someone who's going to show up in the middle of the night when you need them, that's what you need to look for in people.
I was a little bit conflicted on them telling Peter before her about the diagnosis, but I can understand why, because they wanted to make sure she had support.
I really like that for that her parents did that, but they hadn't even been together that long, so I was a little like confused by that, but I did was also surprised by that as well. I was like, "Oh my god, that's so sweet."
That is a good man right there. I know we shit on men on this channel, but he was a pillar for her when she needed it.
We shit on the shitty men. Just note it, okay?
I unfortunately didn't have a lot of support during the time Dad was diagnosed.
You had me, okay?
Well, of course you. I'm just saying we didn't really have much outside support.
I didn't tell anyone in my life outside of obviously our whole family knew. And like Danny's saying, like I don't feel like anyone in our family really and that's just kind of how our family is, and it's one of the reasons where we don't have a super tight knit family, but no one really reached out to be like, I'm here for you, is everything okay? And that's just really like how our family has always been. But I didn't tell any of my friends, and I kind of like distanced myself and isolated myself even before he passed away. And then when he did pass away and I told people, I don't know, I lost a lot of friends. And I feel like Danny relates to this too, where like we didn't have friends show up for us at that point in time. And it really was an eye opening experience. And that's why I mentioned of Peter coming to her side with the diagnosis and just being there, even at the end, lying with her on the bed with her mother. And if you have people like that in your life, like really hold on to them, because it's really rare to come by. And I think I had, like I said, an eye-opening experience to realize that the people that were in my life who are not in my life today were just not meant to be there,
Definitely.
unfortunately. And if you're watching this and you have friends that are going through it and you love and you care about them, then you need to show up for them and be there for them and show them that you love them. And it's just weird. Again, people get weird with death, and that's just another part of it. Like I found it, I don't know, I'm still like astonished till this day. It's 6 years later, and like there were friendships I had for like 10 plus years where I'm like, they just disappeared out of my life, and I'm like, okay, well, that's strange.
I had a friend who I knew since high school who actually lost her dad when she was a young girl. And I thought that her and I would get closer. And we actually lost contact with one another after my dad died, which you know what? She did show up at the hospital when Dad died. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Which I appreciate it. And then, you know, we also lost Dad during the beginning of COVID. So,
Forget that as well. It was a hard time in the world for everyone with a global pandemic happening and a lockdown happening. But I think that that's just another testament of being like how much people are willing to show up for you, even if it's just a text message.
right. I did have someone, a past friend, reach out and we reconnected shortly during that time and then fell out of touch again. So it was, yeah, it was definitely a weird time with friendships. I also don't think I was just stable enough to be a friend to other people. So I understand why I lost those friendships.
Right, and I see that aspect of as well of like me not putting in any effort, but it's also like, well, I devastated, so I don't know. Like that's where like my confusion comes in, where I'm like, well, I know I'm not reaching out and I'm not being the best friend, but like I'm not okay. So now what? But it gave me a lot to reflect on in as a whole, as who I am as a person, who I want to be as a person, do you feel like you had that same kind of reflection, and how long after dad passed do you think it took for you to finally start to reflect?
I was very angry after dad died, and I was zeroing in on the people that didn't show up for me, which wasn't the healthiest. And I got very resentful. So it took me quite a few years. I think I'm at this point in my life where I always I kind of make this joke, but I really don't have like close friends. So I think that I'm still healing those wounds, the relationship wounds, the friendship wounds. It's not easy. It's very difficult to build friendships, and it's even more difficult to sustain them, and that's something Mel and I will talk about in future episodes. So it's I'm still reflecting in that regard. As far as like releasing anger, I think that part is ruminating over our family ties now. So as far as reflection goes, I'm constantly reflecting, maybe to the point of harboring on what's lacking, and that's something I should consider when I am reflecting, because there's so much I am looking for and I want within friendships and family relationships that I haven't received. So I think I'm still navigating those emotions. I've become dad, I feel like, in many ways. I've become my father. At least I didn't become my mother.
Well, I think it's interesting to relate it to the book of like her craving things her mom cooked. I feel like I've craved things dad eats, and I think that's why, like I said, I eat everything now. Because our dad did love to eat, but like I will crave things like I eat everything bagels, and I used to only be like a plain bagel girl because again I was a picky eater, and like our dad liked everything bagels, and Danny likes everything bagels. And then after he passed away, like all I eat now to this day is an everything bagel. Like I'm like this, I like crave the things that he liked, and I'm like I want to get this and that, and like I found that happening a lot.
Yes, I can relate to that. That's why when I would cook, when I do cook, or when I cook with Theo, I'll think about moments of dad, because our parents, our mom did not like to cook. She would cook, but it was her version of cooking.
It was not good. She always says she's surprised because all of her daughters cook. Like I think all of us are good cooks because we were like we want some good food.
Yes, but our dad would cook from time to time, and he was decent. Like he would watch cooking shows, so I knew he could throw down if need be.
I think that's why another reason I get sad because like I wasn't fully into this stuff. Like I was like Danny and I would always cook and like try recipes, but like I wasn't as into it as I am obviously now. And there are moments where I'm like, oh, I want him to be here for these things.
Right. I did want to mention a part in the book that I loved. It's on page It's between 158 and 159. Let me turn to that page so I can find exactly where it was. So I did want to bring up a quote on page 159 that I thought was really beautiful. Michelle says, her art was the love that beat on in her loved ones, a contribution to the world that could be just as monumental as a song or a book. There could not be one without the other. Maybe I was just terrified that I might be the closest thing she had to leaving a piece of herself behind. And she brings this up because there was a part of her that was frustrated that her mom was only a stay-at-home mom and a stay-at-home wife. And when she was younger, she had these moments where she questions what her mom would do when she was at school, and even felt angry that her mother didn't have a hobby or goals. Before she gets diagnosed, her mom does start taking an art class and starts picking up drawing. And there's even this reflection moment for Michelle where she realizes maybe she got her creative side from her mother, or what her mother could be if she had realized that creativity within her earlier on. And I think that goes back to our relationship with our parents, where they may have had passions and a dream, and they either want to see their child fulfill their long lost dream, or they start to discourage their child from being a dreamer because they want to make sure that they pursue realistic paths, right? And I think that's something we related to with Dad, because he was a dreamer and he had creativity within him, and he would come to us with the jokes he wrote, and sure, some of them were cliche or controversial, and we would be like, I don't know about that one, but he always instilled this pursuit within us of art, yeah, of art, and outside of traditional goals, right? Even though he would want us to get a stable job and make sure we had insurance, and he was a blue collar man where he did have, it wasn't a 9 to 5. He worked from like 6 a.m. to 3 p.m., something like that. And he made sure that he provided for us as much as he could. You know, he had his own vices. That's another story.
I think he wanted us to have a stable job as a backup because, like I was mentioning earlier, like he still wanted us to be realistic. And I think sometimes we took that as negativity. But I have a lot, like we both have a lot that our dad introduced us to, music and movies, and I think that shows up in our channel constantly of us commentating on different types of media. And I think to so many movies and shows that our dad introduced us to, and comedy as a whole that he introduced us to, where he'd give us different shows of like, you gotta watch this, this is a classic, and different movies he wanted us to watch, and the impact that had on us and still has on us till today.
Of course, and I do feel we carry a piece of him within us as well, and we feel like if we can make this channel successful, then we're honoring him in a way.
Right, getting to live out his dream, and not like he ever forced that onto us of like, you have to do this. But I do like that you brought up that part of the book, because I also put a post-it on page 167. One of her mom's, one of the, I think it was the art teacher, drops off a letter, and I think the mom picked up art after her sister had passed away. And I think this also goes on to what we were saying in one of our previous videos where we're like, just start somewhere, right? Like, just start drawing just to draw and just start, right? And I was thinking about that while I was reading this part of the book. And I want to read like a few different, I'm not going to read all of it, but I want to read a few different sentences from this. So I'm on page 167. I'm going to read a few different sentences on here. She says, there was a part of me that felt, or maybe hoped, that after my mother died, I had absorbed her in some way, that she was a part of me now. I wonder if her art teacher felt this way too, that I was the closest she could get to being heard. And she says that because the art teacher had left the letter in English, and she felt like the teacher had left it there purposely for her to read. And she says, I remembered her texting me a photo. So she starts rifling through her mom's sketchbook and seeing the things she drew. And she says, I remember her texting me a photo of it when she first started the classes. How proud of her I'd been, despite the rudimentary likeness, that she was trying something new. I noted her progress from page to page. The smaller book was filled with pencil drawings of various objects from around the house, artifacts from her world. And then she goes on to say, sorry, I'm going to the next page. Though I knew my mother had been taking art classes for the past year, and I had even seen photos of a few sketches via text, I'd never seen the bulk of her work. The various signatures revealed something so endearingly dilettante now that she was gone. I began to study her like a stranger, rooting around her belongings in an attempt to rediscover her, trying to bring her back to life in any way that I could. In my grief, I was desperate to construe the slightest thing as a sign. I wondered if the late bloom of her creative interests had shed light on my own artistic impulses, if my own creativity had come from her in the first place, if in another life, if circumstances had been different, she might have been an artist too. And I'm sorry, I was very scattered in this, but I didn't want to read like 2 pages worth of the book. But I really enjoyed this scene where she found this other part of her mother that her mother was discovering later in her life. And I feel like that went along with what we were saying in one of our previous videos. We were doing the little doodlings, and just to start somewhere. And it might seem silly, or you might be like, what is this? But it does mean something. And there's always going to be someone you're leaving behind. I know that this is going to be like dark and morbid, but that's what this whole video is. But there's always going to be someone you're leaving behind when you do pass, and having things for them to look over and look at and see, and stop worrying in the present that doesn't look good, or this isn't enough, or whatever like your negative thoughts are about it. Like, it does mean something. You get what I'm saying?
It does. And I often feel sad that we don't have many things that Dad left behind. I know, I think we had given him, was it both of us or one of us gave him a journal with multiple questions to have him answer and leave behind, and he didn't fill any of that out.
Yeah, so we did give him this book and he didn't fill it out, but I also feel like this is something Michelle spoke about in the book, where her mom was on a lot of medications and she kind of felt like she was losing her to them, and I related to that as well. And I feel like there was a lot of moments where I felt like we had kind of lost Dad before he passed also. Like we lost him to the sickness, and we lost him to the medications. And that's why I'm trying to remind people, like, try to have these conversations and build these memories before it's too late, before it's at that point. And I agree with you. I wish we had more memories of him left behind and filmed more memories with him and took more pictures and did more, but there was a poem that he left behind for us.
There was. Maybe we'll end today's episode with his poem. I do want to comment on a part of the book that you mentioned where Michelle's explaining the excruciating pain her mother was going through and just how debilitating cancer is. It's eating you from the inside out, and that those descriptions made me realize just how much it made me realize where I lacked in acknowledging dad's difficulties and dad's pain. I know we mentioned earlier that our dad was the type to appear strong to his daughters, He never wanted to show weakness. And of course, the medications are going to hide the pain as much as possible. But reading about Michelle's mother, reading that part of the book was hurtful. I just wish we had the proper information to be more of a support system to dad, whether he was trying to push us away or not.
Right. But I think that also just has a lot to do with our upbringing, as I mentioned, where our family isn't super affectionate and we do tend to sweep things under the rug. And as I mentioned earlier, I do really feel like we were in a really deep denial of like, well, he's just going to beat it and then everything's going to go back to normal. I think, again, it was a part of him who just wanted us to live our lives and not be wrapped up in it. Because I also remember, because Danny and I had always talked about moving out of New York, and I remember my dad saying, well, don't stick around for me. And of course I was going to stick around for him. And like we had mentioned that earlier as well, like wanting to move out and be on our own to show him that we can do it, but then also wanting to stay there living with them to be closer with him. So I feel like we beat ourselves up for a lot, but then we there was also things that we did try to like start. I'm stuttering and I'm sputtering and it's all a mess, and I think we got to wrap it up soon, but we did try to go to lunch with him and try to hold on to some kind of normalcy. But like I was mentioning too, where he was just getting too sick, where he wasn't able to go out, or he just wanted to sleep, or the medications were kind of consuming him.
I do have a memory similar to Michelle, because she talks about just sitting next to her mom when she was sleeping most of her day away. And I have a similar memory where dad was sleeping and I went to go sit in the room with him, and I believe it was Goodfellas that was on. And I just remember in the moment feeling like I needed to hold on to this memory.
And I also want to note that you and I were still going to work. Like in this book, Michelle was able to and stop her life and stay and live with her mom and dedicate time to her mother. And that's amazing that she was able to do that. But you, me, and our mom, we were all still going to work, and because we had to. So that's another part of it as well.
Of course, and I think that's something many people don't talk about, is the inability to truly focus on that person who's sick. And I do feel like I should have taken more time off. Like that was just a shitty job. Like who cares about that, you know? And I know we both have mentioned this in the past. Like we should have called out more and we didn't.
I think about that all the time. Like there were so many times where I just worked so, and I still do, and I'm trying now more than ever, where like I'm I'm not in a leadership position and I don't care as much about a title or anything because I want to have more experiences in life. And there were so many moments where like I wish I would have called off and I wish I would have spent more time with him. And it's like now there's nothing you can really do. Like we can't keep regretting it, but a reminder to anyone out there, call out. Go see your loved ones and the people you care about and spend time with them and make memories because it's we're all going to die.
And I know this has been a rather long episode. Of course, we're going to be cutting it down. But I do want to wrap up our review. I think Michelle did a great job at conveying her grief while also immortalizing her mother, right? Creating a piece of art similar to her album where she is able to keep the memory of her mother alive. And if you didn't know, she is a musician. She has a band called Japanese Breakfast. Go check them out. Go check out Crying in H-Mart. I loved so many of her words. I think she's a great writer. She did mention she graduated with a creative writing degree. But I think Michelle found a way to encapsulate her Korean culture and embodies her relationship with her mother. And I really admired her for writing this. I'm glad we read this. It was difficult at many times because we experienced the loss of a parent who also had cancer, and it's not it's such a tragic disease, and I want to be able to revive our dad in a similar way. And I know we have this channel, and the reason we named it Sheehan Sisters is because of our father, and we're always going to keep his last name alive.
Yeah, because we could have named it Danny and Mel or Mel and Danny, but this is something we have always said, and we created this channel even when he was alive, but we are proud of our last name and we want to make sure, we always wanted to make sure it became something, and that was important to us. And we would always say, even if we got married, like we're keeping our last name because our dad doesn't have any sons to keep the last name going, so we're going to keep the last name alive.
But do you have any final words you'd like to express about the book before we wrap up?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said, and I really enjoyed reading this, and I'm glad we read it, and I'm glad every time we finish a book, I'm glad we started this series and this book club. And I agree, I feel like this book encapsulates why art is so important, and her being able to share such vulnerable moments of her life is so inspiring and just reminds me why we're doing what we do as artists, and pushing me to want to write more and read more and express myself in as many ways as possible, and as you said, keep our dad's name alive. And we also went and listened to her music, and she is still releasing music, and I actually really enjoyed her music as well. So I do want to mention another way that we want to keep our dad alive is our book for the month of May, which was his birth month. We will be reading The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, and this was one of our dad's favorite books, so we did want to read it. because it's a classic and it's now banned in schools, and it was a book that our dad enjoyed. So get your copy and read along for the month of May.
Yes, and I do want to point out I've also been inspired to write again, reading Crying in H-Mart. And every time we finish our books of the month, it inspires that writer in me. And I know we haven't been focusing on our writing or our poetry. It's been over a year since we've posted on our poetry page, but I was just thinking about our poetry and art page this morning, and I do want to revive that at a certain point.
I am working on, and I mentioned this to Danny, I've been working on a poetry series based on the stages of grief, and I might have mentioned this in the video as well. Sorry if I say that a lot. I'm just never sure what we're going to keep and what we're not going to keep. But May, I literally just said it. May is our dad's birth month, so his birthday is approaching, and it makes me think of him. And maybe we will be posting on our poetry page, which is linked in the description. And I want to release a full like spoken word video when I complete the series of the stages of grief. So that's something that I want to get back to.
We do want to end this episode with one more snack that we picked up at H-Mart, as well as read a poem our dad wrote before he passed. It's interesting because our parents both have a writer within them, but they didn't raise us. They didn't raise us with that knowledge. It wasn't until Mel and I started writing that they started writing, or they'll show us that they wrote a poem.
Right, and maybe that was in them, like something similar as what Michelle said, like maybe that artist was in her mother all along, and like maybe this was something they did when they were younger, but we just never knew about it.
Right. So we are going to grab our snack, and I will end today's episode with our dad's poem.
Our final snack, cue the corn song. You remember that?
Stop it.
Hey, I'm always going to mention a viral meme. All right, will we insert it? We'll never know. This has been one of our longest videos, I think, today. To date.
I think this went viral on TikTok, but
Oh my God, the smell is strong. It's kind of throwing me off of like smelling corn, but I'm going to eat ice cream. Are you like that as well? Where like obviously most people, their scent is intertwined with their taste, but
I'll be honest, I did try this last night with Theo, so I know how it tastes and I do like it.
should we eat it like corn?
Go ahead. Ready?
You said you did like it or you didn't like it?
I did like it. What do you think?
It tastes good. It tastes like an ice cream sandwich to me. What's not to like? Corn, good. Ice cream, good.
I do have my ramen on the stove. I didn't end up eating in today's episode, but that's my snack after we're done filming.
Let us know if you want to see more mukbangs in the future.
So my dad has 3 entries in this notebook. I'll read both of these. The sky was bright blue. The sun was calling my name. Every tree was green with envy. The day was perfect. Life was good. You see, I'm writing a book, and this is how... There's some typos. And this is how it's gonna start. It's like thousands of other books. You know, where the guy gets the girl at the end? Happily ever after. I always thought I have more time. You see, I've been diagnosed with cancer. The big C. They say, a few things in life will stop you in your tracks. Cancer is one of them. Life and time is funny that way. Nobody knows how long they have. We all have an invisible hourglass that we carry around. Nobody knows how much time is in that glass. So he also wrote this piece. It's called Think of Me. Remember when I'm gone, when you hear a joke or my favorite song. Smile when you think of me. The time you had a drink with me. Think of me not just as your dad, but as a friend who's not so bad. Remember that I love you more than you will know. A million stars times infinity, and you still have far to go. See? Cliches. I'm glad we got this.
Sorry, I'm sobbing over here.
I'm grateful he left some words for us.
And that's what we say is pick up the pen, start writing, pick up the paintbrush and start painting, start making memories and having something left behind. Because just imagine if you had started writing a little sooner, that notebook would be full. But I'm, like you said, I am happy to even just have those.
Of course, and you don't need to leave behind something for someone specific. You know, if you don't have close family members or you're not going to have children, you can still create art to leave for the world.
Right. But I was mentioning earlier, I mentioned a lot earlier, you don't realize it, but there's always going to be someone you're leaving behind. I mean, unless you're the last person on earth to die, which is really sad to think about, but you know, like even Danny and I have each other. Like if they're gonna have to at least have one person hopefully in your life, and you don't know which one of you is gonna go first. I'm sorry. I'm laughing because a lot of it is just, it's really dark.
All right. I think that's everything for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye.